Imagine Paris in 1878. The streets are bustling with heavy vehicles transporting dozens of passengers, yet there's no familiar smell of smoke in the air, no thick black smoke curling above the rooftops, and the sound of hundreds of horses' hooves doesn't echo on the cobblestones. At this time, the overhead trolley wires we know today have yet to become commonplace. They would only emerge decades later. Official historical accounts often attribute the absence of these wires to primitive cable cars or early prototypes of battery systems, but patent records reveal a completely different reality. Between 1876 and 1917, a whole fleet of trams quietly glided through the streets of the French capital, operating silently, environmentally friendly, and incredibly efficiently. The secret behind their movement was compressed air. This technology wasn't just a fleeting experiment. It was successfully utilized for 40 years, reliably transporting millions of people. Yet, it suddenly and almost entirely vanished. The cause was not a technical failure or the unreliability of the mechanisms. The operational metrics told a different story. The real vulnerability of compressed air lay in its inability to be monopolized. Anyone with a water wheel or windmill could compress air and fill tanks themselves. This meant access to virtually free fuel, independence from supply chains, and the impossibility of creating an artificial shortage for profit. Such independence posed a direct threat to those who were building their financial empires on coal and oil at that time. The story of the pneumatic age, which almost came to be, is one of a technology that worked too well. In the 1870s, cities could have been cleaner than modern metropolises, yet there was a deliberate shift from energy freedom to dependence, which we were taught to call progress. Pneumatic trams were not a theoretical concept. They represented a fully functioning infrastructure. A key figure in this narrative was the Polish-French engineer Louis Makarski, who secured his patent in 1876. His brilliance lay in solving a fundamental physical problem that had stumped all previous creators of pneumatic engines. This was the thermodynamic cooling effect during expansion. The laws of physics are unforgiving. When compressed air instantly transitions from a high-pressure zone to a low-pressure one, it expands rapidly, causing an extreme drop in temperature. In early models, this resulted in engines literally freezing from the inside. Valves would freeze, pistons would jam, and the machine would break down. Engines failed not due to a lack of power, but because the mechanisms couldn't withstand the icing. Makarski found an elegant solution by introducing a system he called buoy, a built-in tank with heated water integrated into the air supply mechanism. In this system, compressed air from the tanks passed through hot water before entering the engine cylinders. The water transferred heat to the expanding air, preventing icing and maintaining stable pressure throughout the operational cycle. This was a technically perfect solution based on a profound understanding of thermodynamics. The tanks on the trams stored air at a pressure of about 75 atmospheres, while the heating system kept the water temperature around 90 degrees Celsius. The oil costs for heating were negligible compared to the amount of coal consumed by the steam engines of that era. The results were impressive. The vehicles could reach speeds of up to 30 kilometers per hour and had a range of 10 to 15 kilometers between refuels. Throughout the city, specialized compressor stations were set up where trams could quickly replenish their energy supplies. The capacity of the carriages rivaled that of horse-drawn carriages, but operational costs were significantly lower. The Compagnie Générale des Omnibus successfully operated this pneumatic fleet for 41 years, daily transporting thousands of workers and tons of goods across numerous routes. Yet, in 1917, it all came to an end. The technology was scrapped and the infrastructure dismantled. Officially, this was termed modernization and a transition to electricity. But it was during this period that oil began to seize global dominance, and the transportation system started transforming into a tool for global control. Are you ready to discover how a similar technology secretly developed beneath the streets of New York and why its creator had to become a master of espionage to challenge a corrupt system? Despite the success in Paris, the journey toward perfecting the pneumatic engine was obstructed by the harsh laws of nature. When Louis Makarsky, a French-Polish engineer, began his project in 1876, he encountered a challenge that had previously made the use of compressed air in transportation nearly impossible. It was a thermodynamic paradox. Once air is released from a high-pressure zone into a low-pressure area to perform mechanical work, it expands rapidly, resulting in a sharp drop in temperature. This physical process turned the early pneumatic motors into genuine ice generators. Internal mechanisms would become covered in frost, valves would freeze solid, and pistons would jam in their cylinders. Engines failed not due to design flaws or lack of power, but because the metal couldn't withstand the Arctic cold generated within the system. For the technology to become commercially viable, the engineer needed to find a way to trick the physics of gas expansion. Makarsky's solution was both simple and brilliant, known as the buoy system. He integrated a special tank filled with hot water through which compressed air passed before entering the engine cylinders. As it flowed through this thermal bath, the air became saturated with heat and water vapor. This not only completely prevented the mechanisms from freezing, but also allowed for stable pressure and temperature throughout the entire working cycle. The technical drawings from that era demonstrate a profound understanding of thermodynamics. Air was stored in tanks under a colossal pressure of 75 atmospheres, while the water in the heating system was maintained at 90 degrees Celsius. Remarkably, only a tiny oil heater was used to maintain this temperature, consuming a negligible amount of fuel compared to the voracious burners of traditional steam locomotives. This made Makarsky's pneumatic trams incredibly autonomous and inexpensive to operate. Records from the Paris Transport Company confirm that these vehicles could easily reach speeds of up to 30 kilometers per hour and had a range of 15 kilometers between refuels at urban stations. Passengers of that time experienced a level of comfort that seemed almost fantastical. No jolting, no smoke, and no noise, while the capacity of the cars matched that of horse-drawn carriages, but without the accompanying issues of waste on the streets. The system operated successfully for 41 years, becoming an integral part of Parisian life. However, while European engineers were proving the reliability of pneumatics in everyday use, on the other side of the ocean, in New York, an even more thrilling and secret drama was unfolding, where compressed air became a weapon in the fight against political corruption. How was a marvel of engineering constructed under the busiest avenue of Manhattan, all under the strictest secrecy, destined to forever change the face of urban life? In February 1870, the residents of New York were confronted with an engineering marvel that, by all logical standards of the time, simply shouldn't have existed. Right beneath the bustling Broadway, a subway line was unveiled, built under the strictest secrecy and powered by compressed air. The mastermind behind this ambitious project was Alfred Ely Beach, the publisher of Scientific American and a talented inventor whose story unfolded like a thrilling industrial espionage tale. Beach had proposed the concept of a pneumatic subway to the city officials back in the 1860s. The idea was technically flawless, a sealed tunnel housing a car propelled by a giant fan. The powerful airstream would literally push the vehicle along, much like a capsule in a pneumatic mail system. This setup promised to be fast, efficient, and didn't require engines on the car itself. However, progress was thwarted by political corruption in the form of William Marcy Tweed, known as Boss Tweed, who had complete control over the politics and transportation system of New York at the time. With significant financial interests in surface streetcar companies, Tweed blocked any attempts to create an underground transport system that could rival his business. Realizing that obtaining permission to build the subway was impossible, Beach took an unprecedented risk. he officially requested a license to lay a small pneumatic tube for transporting mail, which didn't seem to threaten the transportation magnates. Once he secured the necessary papers, he and his team began secretive work. Under the cover of darkness, workers manually excavated a tunnel about 3 meters in diameter and over 95 meters long, right beneath one of Manhattan's busiest avenues, illuminated only by lamplight. To avoid suspicion, tons of excavated soil were discreetly removed through the basement of an ordinary clothing store. The result of this underground endeavor was astounding. The brick lining of the tunnel was executed with such precision that the buildings above sustained no damage whatsoever. At the heart of the system was a massive 50-ton fan, capable of generating enough airflow to move a 3-ton car at a speed of 16 kilometers per hour. The car itself, designed for 22 passengers, was a vision of comfort and luxury, featuring plush seats, gas lighting, and elegant windows. When Beach finally opened the subway to the public, the reaction was ecstatic. The waiting station resembled a lavish salon more than a transport hub, walls adorned with murals, a grand piano in the room, a fountain, and even an aquarium. This was not a crude experiment. It was a showcase of what the future of urban transport could look like. Thousands of people rode the pneumatic train, and the press dubbed the project the Subway of the Future. Beach was poised to expand the network throughout Manhattan and had already found investors for his $5 million plan. But this engineering triumph faced the harsh reality of political influence, which turned this success into a forgotten chapter of history. How did New York's political machine manage to dismantle a project that had already proven its viability? And why did the citizens have to pay the price of decades of waiting for this victory of private interests? Do you want to continue and discover how Boss Tweed put an end to the pristine future of the metropolis? Alfred Beach's triumph was short-lived, as he encountered a force that could not be defeated by engineering calculations alone. In late 19th century New York, real power belonged not to the law, but to the political machine known as Tammany Hall, led by William Tweed. For Tweed, the boss, and his associates, any public project was viewed solely as a means for personal enrichment. Beach's pneumatic subway was too transparent, too autonomous, and, most importantly, it did not allow Tweed to control the financial flows he had already distributed among his allies in surface transportation. Using his colossal influence, Tweed managed to convince the state governor to veto Beach's bill for expanding the underground network. The official reason cited was concern for the safety of building foundations, but in reality, it was a political execution of a promising technology. When Tweed himself found himself at the center of a corruption scandal and lost power, Beach's project was not given a second chance. The year 1873 arrived, a time of deep economic crisis that ultimately stripped the project of investments. The luxurious station, complete with a piano and fountain, was sealed off, while the lone car remained frozen in the tunnel beneath Broadway for decades. It was only in 1912 that workers constructing the modern subway line stumbled upon it, a time capsule that reminded everyone of a future that could have arrived 40 years earlier. However, beneath the local political intrigues of New York lay a more significant process at play. The end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th marked an era of forming global energy monopolies. John Rockefeller and other oil magnates were building an empire where every mile traveled had to be paid for by purchasing fossil fuels. Compressed air, which could be obtained almost for free through the power of wind or falling water, posed an existential threat to this model. This is why the year 1917 became a symbolic date, marking the definitive decline of pneumatic transport in major cities. While the world was consumed by global conflicts, a quiet modernization occurred. Eco-friendly and durable systems were replaced with those that required constant fuel purchases or complex centralized electricity generation. Pneumatics did not lose in efficiency. It lost in its ability to generate enormous profits for a select few. Yet, even as cities officially turned away from air in favor of gasoline, this technology did not vanish entirely. It retreated to places where the use of internal combustion engines was perilous, and reliability was valued above marketing slogans. Pneumatics found its last refuge deep underground and in secret communication systems, becoming the invisible backbone of the industrial world. How did compressed air continue to serve humanity in the complete darkness of mines, and how did entire metropolises operate for decades through a physical internet hidden within pipes? When ground transportation was ultimately taken over by oil corporations, compressed air found refuge in the harshest conditions, where human survival literally depended on the purity of energy. Mines and deep tunnels became the last bastions of pneumatics. In the confined spaces of the underground, the use of steam engines was impossible due to suffocating smoke, while early internal combustion engines posed a deadly explosion risk from the slightest spark igniting mining gas. In this environment, pneumatic locomotives proved to be the ideal workers. They not only consumed no oxygen, but in fact expelled fresh, cool air with every engine cycle, improving ventilation for the workers. These powerful machines could pull trains weighing up to 100 tons, operating in complete darkness and dampness for decades. In some European and American mines, such systems remained the primary mode of transport until the mid-1950s, demonstrating that in extreme conditions, reliability and safety outweigh marketing advantages. However, the most monumental testament to this technology was the pneumatic network of Paris. While engines roared above ground, a true physical internet sprawled beneath the streets of the French capital. By the 1930s, the length of this piping system reached a staggering 400 kilometers. It was a complex infrastructure that connected post offices, government buildings, and banks. Capsules carrying documents and letters moved through the city at a speed that seems incredible today. Correspondents could cross the metropolis in mere minutes, oblivious to traffic jams or weather conditions. The Paris pneumatic postal system was so efficient that it remained in operation until 1984. For over a century, the city relied on pressurized energy that worked silently and unobtrusively. This network was a prototype of instant communication, realized in metal and air. But Paris was not alone. Similar systems operated in London, Berlin, New York, and Prague. It was a living demonstration of how pneumatics could sustain the vitality of an entire metropolis for a century without a single gram of fossil fuel directly in consumer engines. But if the technology was so durable, lasting over 100 years without a fundamental change in concept, why do we not see its continuation today? The answer lies in the conflict between engineering excellence and the economic model of consumption. How did the world choose the path of mechanisms intentionally designed to fail, and why did durability become the main enemy of profit? This will be explored in the next part of our investigation. Next, we will delve into how the strategy of planned obsolescence and Rockefeller's economic mathematics displaced transportation capable of serving generations. The main reason pneumatic transport has not survived to this day lies in a fundamental conflict between engineering quality and economic benefit. Pneumatic engines had a characteristic that seems unimaginable for manufacturers today. They were virtually eternal. Unlike internal combustion engines, where thousands of micro-explosions destroy metal every minute, causing friction, soot, and overheating, a pneumatic piston operates in a cold and clean environment. The wear and tear on components in such a system is minimal. Archives contain data on locomotives that served for 50 years without major repairs, requiring only regular lubrication. For the burgeoning industrial economy of the early 20th century, such durability was a sentence. If you sell a machine that lasts half a century, your market saturates too quickly. It was during this time that the concept of planned obsolescence began to take shape. The business model crafted by oil magnates like Rockefeller involved not just selling a vehicle, but creating an endless cycle of consumption. Internal combustion engines fit perfectly into this scheme. They are complex, require frequent servicing, the replacement of numerous consumables, and most importantly, tie the owner to the fuel pump. The myth of energy density, often used to discredit compressed air, was a convenient tool for lobbyists. It was claimed that air takes up too much space and provides too little energy. However, in practice, Paris trams and mining haul trucks proved the opposite. For urban needs and heavy freight transport, this power was more than sufficient. The real issue lay in decentralization. Compressed air is a democratic energy source. It cannot be cut off by a valve on the other side of the continent or burdened with exorbitant extraction taxes if you have access to any source of mechanical power. As a result, the world underwent a great substitution. We traded independence and tranquility for speed and complexity. Regression was neatly packaged in the guise of progress. Instead of improving air storage systems, investments were directed towards complicating gasoline systems. By the mid-20th century, the very memory of the possibility of an alternative path was nearly erased from the textbooks of history and engineering. Most astonishingly, decades before this conclusion, one of humanity's most visionary minds had already foreseen this scenario. His manuscript, predicting the triumph and subsequent oblivion of a pneumatic future, was deliberately hidden from the public eye, like a dangerous prophecy that was not meant to come true. What future for our cities did Jules Verne foresee back in 1863, and why was his vision considered too dangerous for publishers of that time? Few people know that long before oil giants began dictating terms to the world, the greatest visionary of the 19th century, Jules Verne, had already outlined a future we lost. In 1863, he completed his novel Paris in the 20th Century, where he predicted a world reminiscent of the 1960s. His vision was astonishing, a city woven with a network of silent trains powered by compressed air. It was a clean, high-tech metropolis where transportation didn't poison the lives of its inhabitants. However, Verne's publisher, Pierre-Jules Hetzel, rejected the manuscript, deeming it too implausible and grim. The book was only discovered in 1989, locked away in a safe belonging to the author's great-grandson, standing as a mute testament that a pneumatic future was not a utopia. It was a plan deemed inconvenient. The tragedy of this story lies in our tendency to measure progress solely by complexity and power, forgetting the original purpose of technology, to serve humanity without destroying its environment. Paris in the 1870s, with its silent trams and efficient pneumatic mail, was in some ways more advanced than modern metropolises choking on traffic and smog. Back then, engineers designed systems capable of operating for decades, relying on the inexhaustible resources of nature rather than global fuel supply chains. The pneumatic age didn't end in failure, it was artificially interrupted. The choice for gasoline and coal wasn't based on technical superiority. It was a choice for control over independence. We traded the silence of our streets for the roar of engines, and energy freedom for geopolitical conflicts over resources. The history of coal and oil-free trains proves that humanity had a chance to pursue a path of harmony with physics and ecology, and that chance wasn't lost due to a lack of knowledge. It was sold for profit. Today, as the world once again stands on the brink of an energy transition, the experiences of McCarthy, Bick, and other pneumatic pioneers gain new significance. Their legacy reminds us that true progress isn't always about creating something more complex. Sometimes it's about returning to the elegant and clean solutions we held in our hands a century and a half ago. The question is, are we ready today to choose the independence that was once deemed too dangerous for the market economy? After all, air, unlike oil, still belongs to everyone.
Subscribe, because what comes next is something you've never heard before.